Wouldn't it be great if there was such a thing as a misinformation mask? A mask that would protect us from being infected by false information and from spreading it to others unknowingly, just like we do to protect ourselves from COVID. The analogy is not a stretch. The first law of misinformation is we're all vulnerable. We're all vulnerable to believing and spreading false information. Unfortunately, unlike COVID, there is no mask to filter information, and nor can we expect a vaccine. Yes, we need to hold government and tech companies accountable, and that's another story. But we can't rely solely on the efforts of others to solve this problem. And that means that we, as individuals, need to play an active role in reducing the spread and impact of misinformation. So the mask, we can forget about it. I'm a research scientist at the University of Washington Information School and co-founder of the Center for an Informed Public, a university-wide effort to study misinformation and strengthen democratic discourse. Let's start with something currently in the news, the killing of George Floyd and the anti-racism protests that have swept the country. This is an issue that hits close to home too. My daughter is Black, and there's been a lot of misinformation targeting the Black community. Now, sometimes people are simply misinformed, and this happens all the time, but especially at the outset of an event like this or COVID, when there's a vacuum of good information, creating a ripe environment for rumors to spread. I've had to gently correct family and friends who have come to me with false information about Seattle, where I live. Having these conversations can be a bit uncomfortable, but it's tolerable, and actually they're important. After all, we're all vulnerable, and that's how I approach these conversations. On the other end of the spectrum are conspiracies and extreme views. There are stories that the killing of George Floyd was staged, or that it was financed to trigger riots, or that he's not even dead. I don't have anybody in my network who believes these, but common sense tells us if you have an issue like this, and one person's a believer of these conspiracies and then another one isn't, that conversation isn't going to go well. It's between these two ends of the spectrum that are the most problematic and challenging forms of misinformation, the half-truths, the plausible narratives, the believable stories that can and do change people's minds, sometimes leading them down a path to extremism. The individuals and organized groups that are behind these stories, they're doing so with the intent to deceive. This is what we call a disinformation campaign. Disinformation is the intentional spread of false information motivated by some political, social, financial, or other agenda. Let's take a look at an example. This tweet purports to belong to a national Antifa organization. The logo looks real, the account name looks real, the content very plausible. If you took this at face value, you'd think that this organization was behind the protests and working to bring chaos to white communities. In fact, this account was proven to belong to a white nationalist group, and using pretty straightforward tactics, they were able to get this message spread far and wide. And who could blame someone for believing that this was authentic? After all, we're all vulnerable. So what can we do about it? By now, nearly everyone knows what misinformation is. It's headline news. It's in people's social media feeds. But few people understand how misinformation works. And the main point of my talk is we all need to learn the basics. We need to develop an understanding of how individuals and organized groups use technology and exploit social media platforms to spread misinformation, like the tweet I just showed. We also need to develop some better information behaviors ourselves. One I like a lot is slow down. Pause before sharing something online. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Let's look at some examples. We're going to start with the eyes. Yes, they can deceive. Here are two close-ups of faces. Guess what? Only one of them is real. The other is computer-generated. These photos are from an online quiz called Which Face is Real, created by my colleagues Jevin West and Carl Bergstrom to build awareness about the power of artificial intelligence. The technology to create these images is now easily accessible. One can generate thousands of these images and use them to, for instance, create fake social media accounts. In case you were wondering, the one on the left is computer generated. Let's look at another, more recent technology, deepfakes. Deepfakes are what you get when you combine artificial intelligence with machine learning to create audio and video of people saying and doing things they never did. Here's a clip. It's called An Event of Moon Disaster. It was created by MIT this year as an art and educational project.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
Obviously, that speech never occurred. In case you need a history refresher, the moon landing was a success. Until now, this form of media manipulation has mostly targeted individuals or been used for entertainment purposes. However, we've also seen the emergence of deepfakes influencing politics and elections in other countries. Could deepfakes be a factor in America's upcoming presidential election? It's possible, and many experts think so. In cooperation with Microsoft, we just launched an online quiz called Spot Deepfakes to raise awareness about this technology. I hope you'll check it out. Moving on, people not only say and do things they never did, they may not even be people. Enter the world of social media bots. Social media bots are accounts that have been programmed to generate messages, follow other users, retweet their messages. It's relatively easy, again, to create thousands and millions of bots and unleash them onto the internet. Let's look at some examples. Again, we'll stick with the topic of race. This is a retweet network graph of the Black Lives Matter discourse back in 2016. It was created by my colleague Kate Starbird, along with Emma Spiro and their students. What it shows is two communities, the pink, pro-Black Lives Matter, and green, anti-Black Lives Matter. As you can see, the conversation was divided into two echo chambers, with each community retweeting and sharing messages of like-minded members. Now, let's add the impact of a disinformation campaign. Here we have the same graph, this time with orange dots and lines. The orange represents the Internet Research Agency, Russia's propaganda organization. Specifically, the IRA created false accounts and false messages and successfully had their messages retweeted by others in both communities. Why did Russia go to the effort to do this? Remember, disinformation campaigns have a motive. In this case, it was to get Trump elected as a means to polarize our society and weaken our democracy. No matter what side of the political spectrum you are on or what beliefs you hold, you should be angry that there are those out there who are trying to infiltrate your communities and manipulate your thoughts. So why was Russia's campaign so effective? Why is any disinformation campaign effective? This is where we enter the cognitive realm. Disinformation is effective because it exploits personal beliefs to trigger psychological and emotional responses, such as to make you fearful or angry, like the Antifa tweet I showed earlier. It's effective because it's accomplished slowly over time through multiple encounters across multiple platforms, from Facebook to Twitter and YouTube and back. It's the weaponization of information designed to undermine truth and our trust in each other. It's a big problem, and many people are working on it. Tech companies and social media platforms are working on detection technologies to remove harmful misinformation. Policy experts are working on legal remedies, mindful of our First Amendment rights. Journalists are working on how to tell these stories without adding fuel to the fire. And teachers and librarians are retooling their approaches to teaching information literacy. All of these efforts are important, and many organizations are working on it, including our center. But my message has been, this is not enough, and we have to play a role as well. First, we need to develop greater situational awareness, or informational awareness, if you will, of how misinformation works. That's been the topic of this talk, but I've only scratched the surface. I hope people will continue to educate themselves, especially as new technologies and tactics emerge, as they will. Already, we've witnessed Russia deploying some new techniques targeting our upcoming election. Second, we need to practice better ways of navigating information. The conventional approaches that most of us grew up with, like triangulating sources of information, they're not sufficient anymore, as I hope my examples have made clear. One approach that our center is promoting is called SIFT, developed by our partner Mike Caulfield at Washington State University. SIFT stands for Stop, Investigate the Source, Find Better Coverage, and Trace Claims to the Original Context. These moves, as Mike calls them, take 30 seconds or less to execute, and they can make a huge difference. Again, I'm very fond of stop. And if there's one thing that people can do right away, it's to pause. Take a look at the claim. Does it pass the smell test? In closing, misinformation is a foundational problem. When the World Health Organization made one of its early pronouncements about the COVID, they called it simultaneously a pandemic and an infodemic. And they were right. In fact, infodemic could be used to describe almost every challenge we face today. Misinformation also tears at our social fabric and our relationships with family and friends. No one I've spoken with, whether they're left, right, or center, is satisfied with this situation. It worries everybody. And this perhaps is a hopeful sign, but only if we all play our parts. Thank you for listening.